The twin suns of Zorath blazed across a violet sky as the great city of Velthara roared with celebration. After years of bitter war, the Zalorn Empire had triumphed over their deadliest rivals, the Iraqi. Fireworks streaked above the crystal towers, casting shimmering lights over the sea of cheering aliens below. Music played from soaring amplifiers, echoing through every corner of the planet's capital. Every plaza, every avenue, was alive with laughter, song, and the fierce pride of a people who had just crushed an enemy that once seemed invincible. At the heart of the city stood the Grand Victory Hall, a colossal structure made of obsidian, glass, and pulsating energy beams. Inside, the Zalorn High Command gathered. Generals, tacticians, warlords, and scientists, all dressed in ceremonial armor of gleaming black and crimson. Long tables overflowed with food from conquered worlds, exotic fruits and meats from across the galaxy, now theirs to enjoy. Commander Kryn, the supreme leader of Zorath's military forces, stood at the center stage, raising his curved blade into the air as he addressed the crowd with a voice that shook the walls. "Let the stars remember this day," he declared, his eyes burning with pride. "The Iraqi have fallen. We are the unchallenged power of this galaxy. The war is over. The age of the Zalorn begins now." The hall erupted into deafening cheers. Toasts were made. Banners waved. Soldiers danced with citizens. Old warriors cried tears of joy. For once, there was no fear. Only triumph. Above the hall, in the watchtower known as the Eye of Zorath, a technician leaned back in his chair, sipping a glowing drink and smiling to himself as sensor screens flashed harmless data. It was a night to relax. The entire planet had let down its guard, believing no threat could reach them now. That belief shattered within seconds. Without warning, a low, distant hum began to tremble through the ground. At first, it was too faint to notice over the celebration, but then the tremble grew. Glasses on banquet tables began to rattle. Light fixtures flickered. The joyful noise slowly died down, replaced by murmurs of confusion. Then the ground itself shook. A thunderous boom echoed from the sky, and the holographic walls of the hall flickered. All eyes turned to the central display sphere hovering above the stage. It flashed red. An automated voice crackled through the air, robotic and cold. "Alert. Incoming fleet detected. Unknown origin. Trajectory. Direct entry into Zorath system." Commander Kryn's smile faded. The technician in the tower stared at the readings again, his drink forgotten on the floor. Strange shapes were piercing the outer rim of their star system. Silent, fast, and unregistered. The crowd stood frozen beneath the flickering red light. A second message appeared, this time sharper, more urgent. 5 words that silenced every voice and drained the color from every face. Warning: humans are approaching Zorath. Panic spread through Velthara like wildfire. The joy of victory had vanished, replaced by confusion, fear, and disbelief. The Zalorn had never faced a threat from the species called humans, not directly. Whispers of them had traveled across the stars, fragments of strange stories carried by dying mercenaries or intercepted transmissions from distant systems. They were rumored to be bold, chaotic, and dangerously creative, but never a true concern for the mighty Zalorn Empire. That perception was about to change. In the War Dome, the Zalorn High Command gathered once more, this time in alarm. Holographic projectors lit the room with swirling star maps, red markers pulsing around the edge of the Zorath system. Every general and strategist in the room stood tense, scanning the data again and again as if hoping it would vanish. It didn't. The foreign ships were real, 12 of them, moving faster than anything ever recorded. No transponder signals, no standard energy signatures, just dark, silent vessels carving a path straight for the heart of the Empire. General Akris, a veteran of 10 campaigns, leaned over the table, claws tapping the metal surface. "These ships," They didn't arrive from any known gate, he said, voice low with unease. They bypassed our sensors until the final moment. This technology is not standard. Commander Kryn narrowed his eyes. Perhaps the humans stole it, he muttered. Perhaps they are scavengers like the Chotari. Whatever they are not prepared for us. But there was something strange in his voice. Doubt. And that doubt was growing. An advisor to the side of the room, younger and less decorated, stepped forward hesitantly. Commander, if they have such speed and stealth, and they know exactly where to strike, this may not be a scouting party. This may be a message. The room fell silent. Kryn turned his gaze to the main screen, where a blurry image of the lead ship had just come into view. Sleek, angular, and almost organic in shape, it looked nothing like the bulky designs of Zalorn warships. It resembled a predator, silent, calm, and deadly. Across the planet, defense stations scrambled to life, their gunners and operators shaking off the celebrations and preparing for battle. The city's sky was no longer filled with fireworks, but with the rising hum of shield generators and anti-orbital cannons. The people of Zorath stood outside their homes, watching with wide eyes as lights shifted and sirens wailed. They had expected peace after their victory, a time of rest and power. Instead, something unknown had arrived. Something that had waited, observed, and struck not when the Zalorn were strong, but the moment they believed they were untouchable. In that moment, a creeping realization spread among the leaders and citizens alike. This was not a coincidence. This was a response. The Zalorn had won their war, but perhaps they had celebrated too soon. For now, the humans were coming, and they had come in silence. The 12 human ships entered Zorath's outer orbit without firing a single shot. They hovered in perfect formation, ignoring every warning, refusing all hails, and radiating a quiet, controlled menace. The silence itself became the message. In the command citadel, the Zalorn generals studied the vessels with growing dread. Their scans revealed nothing, no life signs, no known power cores, no weaknesses. It was as if the ships were ghosts wrapped in steel. For a species that prided itself on military strength, this lack of information was terrifying. On the surface, the people of Zorath watched the skies darken. The suns dimmed behind the black silhouettes of the human fleet. Children stopped playing. Merchants abandoned their stalls. Even the birds fell silent. The festive banners that still hung from balconies now fluttered like forgotten relics of a time that had ended too quickly. Inside the war dome, arguments flared. Some demanded immediate attack. Others urged caution, knowing too well how the Iraqi had fallen after underestimating strange enemies. Commander Kryn raised his hand, silencing the room. His voice, calm but heavy, echoed through the chamber. Fire a warning shot. Aim for the space just ahead of their lead ship. Let them know they are not welcome. A massive orbital cannon, powered up, its blue energy core glowing against the night sky. The cannon fired. The blast streaked toward the human's lead vessel, a blinding lance of pure energy. It stopped inches from its target, held in place by an invisible force. The energy twisted, shimmered, and dissolved into the vacuum. The Zalorn stared at their screens, stunned. That weapon had torn holes through Iraqi battleships, yet the humans didn't even move, not an inch. No retaliation, no fear, no reaction. Then, for the first time, the lead ship spoke. A voice boomed across all channels, translated perfectly into the Zalorn tongue, not harsh, but calm, too calm. We observed your victory. We let you celebrate. But now, balance must return. No name was given, no identification, only a final sentence. Prepare to receive judgment. Before a reply could be sent, a beam of light descended from the human vessel, piercing the sky like a divine spear. It struck one of the Zalorn's orbital defense stations, not with a blast, but with silence. The structure simply vanished. No explosion, no debris. One moment it was there, the next it was gone. Fear settled deep into the hearts of the watchers. The Zalorn had faced fleets, monsters, even black hole weapons, but never a force that moved with such purpose, such patience, and such quiet destruction. In that instant, the truth became clear. The humans had not come in anger, nor in conquest. They had come because something in the Zalorn victory had crossed a line, something the humans had chosen not to ignore. The celebration was truly over now, and in its place stood a question none dared to ask aloud. What had awakened the humans? The air on Zorath turned heavy, not from smoke or fire, but from the weight of fear spreading through every corner of the Empire. After the silent erasure of the orbital station, the human ships remained still, as if daring their enemies to act, again. Within the command citadel, the mood had shifted from urgency to panic. High-ranking officers barked conflicting orders, lower ranks scrambled to interpret them, and the once disciplined core of the Zalorn military spiraled into confusion. Commander Kryn stood motionless before the central command screen, staring at the empty space where the station once floated. His mind, sharp from decades of war, could not explain what he had seen. There had been no energy signature, no heat trail, no measurable impact. The station hadn't been destroyed. It had been removed from reality. In the War Dome's strategy chamber, scientists were summoned, each more bewildered than the last. Theorists proposed advanced dimensional displacement. Others whispered about technologies that could rewrite matter itself. But none of their ideas mattered in that moment. What mattered was that nothing the Zalorn had, no weapon, no shield, no strategy, seemed able to touch these human ships. On the surface, chaos began to take hold. News of the erased station spread faster than any official transmission. Families fled from cities, hoarding supplies and looking skyward. Priests returned to ancient temples long abandoned. Soldiers, once proud of their empire, now questioned everything. The sky no longer brought hope or victory. It brought the slow approach of judgment. Meanwhile, deep beneath the capital, inside the vault of records, an old historian named Thalris paced alone. Surrounded by forgotten data scrolls and long-buried files, he searched for something, anything that could explain the humans. His hands shook as he opened a sealed archive dating back thousands of cycles. A symbol glowed faintly on the cover, an ancient mark of the first expansion, from the time before Zorath became an empire. Within the archive were fragments of old explorer logs, notes written in panic, maps with missing systems. One phrase repeated again and again across different entries, etched in desperate script. Do not engage the Terrans. Watch, record, but never provoke. Thalris's breath caught in his throat. He had heard the word Terran before, once, during his early training. A forgotten name, buried beneath centuries of conquest and pride. But now it returned, clearer than ever. The humans were not unknown. They had been seen long ago, by scouts, who had vanished after reporting back, and the message had always been the same: leave them alone. Thalris stumbled to his communicator, calling for Commander Kryn. This was never supposed to happen, he whispered to himself. They warned us. They were always watching. And somewhere far above, the 12 human ships began to shift. Their formation widened, slow and precise, like a hand opening. Lights blinked along their hulls, not in anger, but with quiet certainty. They had waited long enough. Now it was time to act. And as Zorath watched helplessly, the humans prepared their next move, not in fury, but in cold, deliberate resolve. The sky cracked open above Zorath as the human ships descended, not like falling meteors, but like ancient gods returning to claim forgotten ground. Their hulls shimmered with a strange light, neither metallic nor organic, but something in between, something impossible to define. They did not rush, they did not threaten. They simply lowered, calm and steady, until their shadows touched the tallest spires of the capital. In the streets below, the crowds no longer screamed. Silence had taken over, not forced by fear alone, but by awe. Every being, young and old, stood still, eyes fixed upward. No one could understand what kept those ships in the air. No thrusters. Burned. No wings flapped. They just hovered, immune to gravity, immune to comprehension. Inside the command citadel, Commander Kryn stared out the viewing platform, the face of a warrior now worn by uncertainty. His clawed fingers tightened behind his back. The historian's warning echoed in his mind. The Terrans. The ghosts from the stars. The Watchers. And now, the judges. Thalrus, the old historian, stood beside him, eyes full of sorrow. He spoke, softly, not as a man of knowledge, but as one burdened by truth. They never attacked first, he said. They observed. They recorded. But if they rise, it means a boundary has been crossed. Something we did, something in that last war, woke them. Kryn remained silent, but the truth settled over him like a storm. The destruction of the Corellians had not been war, it had been extinction. Not even mercy had been shown. Entire planets were wiped clean, voices silenced forever. And perhaps, just perhaps, the humans had heard the last scream that no one else did. Outside, one of the ships began to shift. A panel opened, smooth and silent, revealing not weapons, but a glowing orb of light. It pulsed with rhythm, as if alive. Then it expanded, slowly forming into a humanoid shape, tall, robed in translucent light, with no visible face, no armor, no weapons. It hovered above the people, not speaking, not moving, merely watching. From the other ships, more of these light forms emerged, each unique, but all radiating the same aura of ancient power. One by one, they scattered through the city, stopping. Above key locations, the government tower, the war museums, the main archives. Their presence was not loud, but it was absolute. In the council chambers, the Empress herself fell to her knees, trembling not from fear of death, but from the unbearable weight of being seen. Not judged by law, nor by politics, but by something deeper. Something older than empires. Something that remembered. Across Zorath, citizens began to kneel, not out of command, but from instinct. Every Zalorn could feel it now. This was not an invasion. It was a reckoning. The humans had arrived, not to fight, not to conquer, but to remind the galaxy of what should never be forgotten. Mercy, balance, consequence. And as the city held its breath beneath the silent guardians of Earth, the stars above flickered, less like stars now and more like watching eyes. Beneath the silver-lit sky of Zorath, the once mighty empire stood frozen as the glowing human entities hovered in silence. Days passed without a single word spoken, without a single weapon fired. The tension that had once felt like a tightrope now shifted into something else, something heavier, more ancient. It became clear that these beings were not soldiers, but messengers, sent not for battle, but for remembrance. The archives of Zorath, once ignored by all but historians, were now at the center of it all. Inside the vault of records, the oldest files, dust-covered, nearly forgotten, began to glow with a strange light. The data embedded in their cores flowed upward, drawn by invisible forces, forming holographic visions in the air. These projections showed scenes from the war, cities reduced to ash, civilians fleeing in terror, prisoners begging for mercy and receiving none. The truth unfolded for all to see, unfiltered and undeniable. There was no room for denial. The people of Zorath watched their history play back in vivid, unforgiving light. Entire generations now understood the depth of the cruelty that had gone unspoken. Streets once filled with pride turned cold with shame. It was not just the recent war against the Corellians being shown, it was all of it. Every conquest, every silenced voice, every decision driven by power instead of peace. The humans had not just come for justice, they had come to hold up a mirror, and what reflected back was monstrous. In the Great Hall of Governance, Empress Takira wept as she stood alone beneath one of the glowing human forms. Her voice, once sharp and commanding, now trembled as she spoke into the quiet chamber. We thought we were building greatness. We believed domination was strength, but we only became echoes of what we destroyed. Her words echoed throughout the planetary network, broadcast without ceremony or censorship. Across cities and colonies, Zalorn citizens heard the voice of their ruler, not giving orders, but confessing. There was no applause. There were no cheers. Only silence and a growing understanding that nothing would ever be the same. In the distant plains of Villari, a monument had stood for centuries, celebrating the great burning of the Harnack people. Without touch or command, that monument cracked down the center and crumbled into dust. Similar events followed across the empire. Statues honoring tyrants fell. Memorials built on lies dissolved into nothingness. The human watchers did not act. They simply were. Their very presence reshaped truth, exposed wounds too long hidden. Then slowly, one by one, the beings began to rise back toward their ships. No farewell was spoken. No punishment was declared. They left behind no fire, no ruin, only clarity, and a silence that stretched through every city like a quiet storm. As the ships prepared to ascend, the sky seemed to shift. Not brighter, not darker, just lighter. As if a weight had finally lifted. And in the hearts of the Zalorn people, something strange began to grow. Not fear, not shame, but the beginning of something long forgotten. Humility. As the last of the human ships vanished into the stars, the planet of Zorath remained utterly still, as though the very air itself refused to move, afraid to break the silence left behind. The once mighty cities, gleaming with the pride of conquests and victories, now stood quiet, stripped of their arrogance and glory. Towers that once touched the clouds now seemed small beneath the vastness of the sky. The people looked up, not with fear, but with a strange new emotion, wonder mixed with regret. Across the empire, screens once filled with propaganda now displayed empty black. News feeds ran only one repeating message: let us remember what was shown. Schools reopened, not to teach domination, but to teach truth. History was rewritten, not to glorify wars, but to honor the lost. Where parades of military triumph once marched, now stood gatherings of mourning, remembrance, and reflection. Entire districts turned into gardens of silence, where statues of fallen enemies were built, not as trophies, but as apologies carved in stone. Empress Takira no longer ruled from the throne room high above the clouds. She stepped down from her platform of power and walked among her people, dressed not in armor, but in plain robes. Her speeches now carried no command, only questions. "How do we heal?" she asked one evening, standing in the rain among farmers whose homes had once been seized for war production. "How do we begin again?" The answer came not in words, but in action. Soldiers laid down their weapons and helped rebuild homes. Engineers turned war machines into transports for crops and medicine. Former generals traveled to worlds that had once been enemies, offering not threats, but aid. And the galaxy watched. The silence of the stars remained unbroken, but the presence of the humans lingered like the afterglow of a great storm. They had come not as conquerors or saviors, but as witnesses, silent, powerful, and impossible to ignore. And their message had been received. In time, the name Terran, became something spoken with both fear and reverence, not because of the destruction they could bring, but because of the reflection they forced others to see. No one knew if they would return. Some believed they were always watching, hidden in the quiet spaces between the stars. Others said they had returned to their distant world, satisfied that justice had been served not with weapons, but with truth. But all agreed on one thing. The celebration that had once marked the Empire's victory was now remembered as the beginning of its awakening. The day when the stars reminded a proud civilization that strength without wisdom is only a shadow. That silence can be louder than any battle cry. And that sometimes the most powerful force in the galaxy is not war, but the moment a civilization looks into the eyes of another and truly sees itself.